Hello, everyone. Meteorologist Ted Keller. I hope you had a great 4th of July weekend. We have still some severe weather risks to talk about, including a level 3 out of 5, a little unusual for this time of year. I'll talk more about that high plains, central plains risk for today. Also, we have the remnants of a tropical storm. If you will recall, Chantal made landfall, moved through the Carolinas, still producing some heavy rain in the Northeast. We'll zoom in on that. Also, there's just patches of heavy rain in the northern plains and then in the Northeast, and also still in Texas. We'll take a closer look at that situation as well. What is left of once tropical storm Chantal is now still visible on the satellite imagery here today. Clearly spinning in the clouds here over southern Chesapeake Bay. So it's affecting parts of eastern Virginia, but also parts of western Maryland and Delaware. Here is the flood watch that's in effect for that area. Actually does go as far north as Philadelphia and even into, much of New Jersey. And then Delaware is completely in it. And then the Baltimore area, almost Washington, a lot of the Chesapeake Bay area is still under that flood watch. Now, according to the government forecast for precipitation for the next 3 days, it's a combination of both a tropical system that's decaying, which was Chantal, and a frontal system. So the next 3 days, rainfall accumulation will be over 2 inches if you see the red shading, and over 4 inches if you see the yellow shading there, almost into Delaware, but actually covering that area just off to the east of Chesapeake Bay. So pretty good rains in connection with actually two sort of weather systems just combining to make some heavy rain out there. We're still on the tropics, so we did go through 3 of the Atlantic names so far with Dexter on deck. But there's nothing really stirring over the Atlantic right now, nothing expected for the next 7 days. Back out over the East Pacific, we've got Gil, Henriette, and Ivo still on the list for possible tropical activity, and we've got about a 30% chance here of some tropical storm development. And an area has been pretty active, but honestly, most years when you look out here, they go through the name list pretty quick. It's a very favorable area. Warm waters. Most of these storms will go into colder currents up here and die. If they can get a more westward trajectory, then they tend to survive a little bit longer. Severe weather outlook. There is just sort of a low-level chance all the way from Maine down to the mid-Mississippi River Valley ahead of that front that's moving through the Northeast. That will cool things off for some people. Good news there. But if you can almost see here already how the emphasis is in South Dakota and Nebraska, I'll zoom in on that area here for today. So that's an enhanced risk area, 3 out of 5. Tell you right now, that's going to be a wind machine, as many storms in the summer are. The hail threat kind of goes down a little bit. The tornado threat decreases. Doesn't completely go away a lot of times, but you can just tell by the way this is shaped that they're expecting an arc of thunderstorms to develop, which usually congeals into a line of storms where a lot of the wind damage typically can get organized. But there is a tornado risk with this. It's a 2% chance. But it runs down from Fargo through eastern South Dakota and into the heart of central and western Nebraska and a corner of northeast Colorado as well. If we take a look at NATOcast, it actually is kind of hot on a 5% chance up there, tucked in the northeast corner of North Dakota, and then more sporadic chances through Nebraska in that 2% area. All this is within the 2% area, but they're emphasizing North Dakota a little bit more. We'll see what happens. You know, NATOcast also produces wind products. The page is called NATOcast, but they do wind and hail too. So they're looking at the wind risks a little bit higher. So an enhanced risk of 65 knots or greater. So that's about 70 miles per hour there in a corner of Nebraska and out here through the intersection of Kansas, Nebraska, and also Colorado. So be watching for that. Here's the HRRR simulation of the radar. This is through 6 a.m. tomorrow morning, Tuesday morning. You can see the thunderstorms breaking out quite readily here in an enhanced risk area, which is right there. And then we get, it looks like a little bit of a squall line moving into northern Missouri by the end of the period. Very typical activity. Also notice rain coming out of Texas and also increasingly into Arkansas. We'll discuss that when we talk about the heavy rain coming up here in a minute. The severe weather outlooks for the next couple of days: Tuesday, just kind of a broad brush lowest risk possibility from southern Illinois back to Colorado, including all of Oklahoma. And so, and again, usually on day 2, there might be some room by tomorrow morning to get that level 2 put in there somewhere once more is known about the situation. Same for Wednesday, 2 patches of lowest risk, marginal risk. There are Virginia and the Carolinas, the Dakotas, and Nebraska. And then on Thursday, the Weather Service painting a rather unusual day 4 outlook, which this time of year that's a high confidence level that, again, thunderstorms are going to revisit those same areas of Nebraska northward into North Dakota. Let's take a look at the supercell composite outlook. Now, this goes far ahead into the July 14th through the 20th period right here. And that is showing, again, North and South Dakota under the gun, but increasingly a little bit of a flow looks like a monsoon flow, maybe a combination of moisture coming in from these 2 directions might be enhancing the supercell risk there in the western plains and down into New and Old Mexico. Well, let's switch gears and look at the whole U.S. here on the visible satellite loop. You can see there's a frontal boundary right here. Tendency to clear the air out behind that a little bit. We still have some activity up here in the Dakotas, waiting on storms to develop here, and we still have activity in the hill country region where the devastating, deadly floods occurred days ago. Still under the risk there. We'll take a zoomed-in look here in a minute. But the 500 millibar flow is showing weak disturbances. So we have one weak little disturbance right here, another one kind of spinning around the Gulf. That's not expected to become tropical. Interestingly, we have a low off the California coast, and that's starting to possibly increase the moisture flow into Arizona here over the next couple of days. The strongest wave or depression in the 500 millibar flow is this in the Dakotas area, and that's really what's going to help fuel severe weather here today, and also in the northern plains keep that ball rolling over the next couple of days. On the surface, we have that front that runs from almost around the Buffalo area down just south of Indianapolis through central Missouri, winds up as a warm front connecting to very weak pressure systems, very characteristic of summer. You don't see a lot of strong lows or highs for that matter. One of the reasons why the tornado risk decreases, we just don't have the organization in the low-level wind field to really get widespread tornado possibilities. Not impossible to get them, but generally that decreases quite a bit in the summer months because the jet stream is weaker and it's not forcing these systems. We'll take a look at the south-central U.S. here. So it's a typical summer day through many of these areas. Frontal boundary, like I said, is moving through this area with showers and thunderstorms. We have kind of a convergence of cloud cover here. The thunderstorms producing these outflow boundaries here today. Still an area of concern down here in Texas, and that's where we're going to focus our attention next. As of around 1 o'clock in the afternoon, we still have this flood watch in effect. That includes, here's Killeen, Texas right here. Here's Waco out of that area. But Austin, San Antonio, and all that hill area back to the west of those areas. And these were flash flood warnings as of around, again, noon Central Daylight Time. Those, of course, take those with a grain of salt. If you're watching this hours later, they do change their warnings. But I did want to show you, though, that area is still very much under the gun. Again, with this radar loop, the one thing I want to show you is how the storms are just not excited to move anywhere. And that's part of the problem. So you're combining slow storm motion with already saturated ground with summertime precipitation efficiency is pretty high. And how do we measure that? Well, you look at one thing, precipitable water. That starts to get pretty high in the summer in pockets. And you can see a stretch of it that's anywhere between, let's say, 1 and 2 inches. So all that means is you take a column of air and theoretically remove all the vapor from it and turn it into liquid and put it in a rain gauge. One snapshot. And that's how much you would get in theory. That does not speak about rainfall efficiency. In other words, what's the process inside the cloud. And also doesn't address the fact that you can continue feeding this type of precipitable water into a storm. And you can also redevelop storms over the same area. But this is one of the variables right here. This does lead to a high precipitation efficiency. And so it's one of the reasons why this area is still under a threat for heavy rains. And in fact, if we look at the next 2 days from the government source, Weather Prediction Center, they are seeing areas of 2, I should have gotten rid of this, sorry about that, but the areas of purple here are 2 inches. You even see a little bit of a yellow area there, that's 4 inches. But notice increasingly, that this precipitable water area was, remember, it was extending over here into Arkansas. And sure enough, now Arkansas is seeing a little more widespread heavy rain with 1 to 2 inch totals, very common. That's over the next 2 days. If we look over the next 5 days, just kind of give the country a look. Remember, we already talked about these heavy rains here, combination of the leftovers of Chantal and a front. The front's pretty obvious here. And the northern plains are going to start to kick in with some heavier rain with those weather systems we reviewed on the severe weather outlooks. They're going to be heavy rain producers at times here over the next 5 days. We do have some pockets of hot weather for approaching, well, it's the early part of July, approaching the middle part of July. I'm not really seeing what I would call a heat wave developing anywhere, but we have interior areas of Washington under heat advisories, especially for tomorrow. And then in the northeast U.S., much of New York and even parts of the northeast under a heat advisory. Here's that flood watch we talked about with the remnants of Chantal. At 1 p.m. Eastern Daylight Time, we have temperatures 87 in Boston, and 85, and they're in south central New York. So temperatures are heating up for that time of day. Again, nothing real extraordinary. Heat advisories in the summer are pretty common, especially in bigger cities. You just have to watch out for those areas. And here's the high temperature forecast for today. It's indicating Elmira up to 93 today, and Syracuse up to 94. And again, the 90s extending through much of central New York State. The reason for the advisories, that's for today. Then I'll switch gears, talk about tomorrow, and show like Walla Walla, Washington, 103 degrees. Spokane, right? They pronounce the town Spokane in Missouri, so it's Spokane, Washington, 98 degrees. So let's take a look at some more temperatures. Well, here on this graph, so if you look at the colors here, this is indicating whether it's above or below normal. So the country's kind of split. We have cooler than normal temperatures. That doesn't mean you can't get to 90, but again, you're comparing this to normal. And so you have departures that are in the green here. So that's not a horrible departure away, not real cool, but still kind of unusual. The hottest weather, which is the departures are approaching 12, 15 degrees above normal. They're through Washington up into parts of Montana, and a little toasty on the east coast of the United States. This is for Tuesday. Skipping ahead to Thursday, the heat kind of shifts into the central plains, northern plains. Much of Tucson, 107 degrees forecast for Thursday. Interior California still very hot as well. A few below normal cool spots, so they're going to kind of trade places in the northwest there and go below normal for a while. Maybe 8 to 10 degrees below the normal high, so upper 60s in the northern part of Montana. And then on Saturday, looking a little more ahead, still a really cool pocket of air. We're seeing temperatures highs only in the 80s in the middle of summer on Saturday in Kansas and parts of Nebraska, much of Nebraska actually, and the warmth returns to the northwest a little bit more. And the last graphs we'll look at, this is the 6 to 10 day temperature forecast. So this is going from Saturday beyond. So this does look like a warmer country for the next week of July, with much of the interior of the plateau region of the west seeing pretty high confidence of above normal temperatures, as will the northeast. Central U.S. just kind of in the middle, not real high, probably is either way. A little dry out west on the 6 to 10 day forecast. This begins this Saturday and goes through Wednesday of next week. And then a little wet in the southeast, and also, again, a little evidence of that monsoon activity, Arizona, New Mexico, and parts of West Texas. If that holds true, it would stay away from the areas that have been hardest hit, but it's an extended forecast, so we'll see how that develops still. This time of year, getting moisture from these two directions and slow-moving storms is very common. Thanks for watching this edition of Weather to Watch. It comes out every other day, or as the weather necessitates. Please remember to share this with your friends, subscribe to the channel, or at the very least, like what you just watched. Thanks.